Saddam Hussein ruled the country with an iron grip. His eldest son, Uday Hussein, built a shadow empire inside it, a parallel state. This terror network eventually shattered alongside the main regime, but its foundation took decades to pour. The government concealed the full scope of this system for years. In 2003, Baghdad fell. Coalition troops breached Uday's private bunkers. They uncovered the raw mechanics of absolute impunity. They found more than weapons. They found archives. Hundreds of videotapes lined the metal shelves. Typed documents cataloged the abuses. His violence never resembled the random chaos of an isolated psychopath. It functioned as a highly organized state machine. He did not evade the legal system. He weaponized it. National intelligence agents tracked his targets. Uniformed police officers guarded the doors during his abductions. The state turned terror into a daily administrative routine. Not a single Iraqi judge issued a warrant for his arrest before foreign tanks crossed the border. Born in Baghdad on June 18, 1964, Uday absorbed the logic of absolute rule from the cradle. The law was never a barrier. It was a weapon for the chosen. He tested this weapon early inside the walls of Baghdad College High School. How do you raise the perfect dictator? You give a 13-year-old absolute power over adults and security forces. The campus was a sanctuary for the Ba'ath Party elite. Uday dictated the rules. Teachers stayed silent. Classmates looked away. But the schoolyard quickly became too small. Serving as vice president under Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, Saddam Hussein was already hijacking the country's institutions. He pulled his eldest son directly into the core of the shadow state. The boy stood in the dark observation room. Behind the one-way glass, the Mukhabarat interrogated a bleeding suspect. A heavy gold-plated pistol rested in the teenager's hands. The metal slide clicked sharply in the dead silence. Adult intelligence officers stepped aside. Hardened veterans stood at attention and saluted the boy. By 1979, Saddam seized the presidency. The entire geopolitical architecture of the nation shifted. Iraq held a population of 13 million people. Their lives, their resources, their sheer survival. All of it was de facto handed over to a 15-year-old schoolboy. The government apparatus did not simply tolerate a psychopath, it systematically engineered him. Classroom lectures ended. The 15-year-old took his seat at closed political dinners alongside foreign diplomats. By the early 1980s, Baghdad fractured into two parallel worlds. Generals drove thousands of Iraqi conscripts into the trench meat grinder of the Iran-Iraq War. Young men choked on ash. They died in brutal human wave attacks. Simultaneously, government cargo planes landed in the capital. They unloaded crates of premium European liquor. The Ba'ath Party hosted closed-door receptions. The regime converted active military bases into exclusive VIP clubs. Elite guards locked the perimeters. Inside the bunkers, the heavy scent of expensive imported scotch sharply contrasted with the grim reality of trench soot and burning cordite. The ruling class parasitized the resources of a bleeding nation. While soldiers rotted in the mud, the president's son inspected these restricted compounds for an entirely different purpose. He arrived flanked by a massive armed entourage, custom suits, gold-plated pistols, absolute impunity. He transformed these state-funded gatherings into private hunting grounds. He systematically scanned the imported entertainers and female guests, singling out his targets. The government apparatus provided the isolated venues and the alcohol. He supplied the cruelty. Every restricted zone and high-level political circle opened its doors. The untouchable predator was exactly 16. By 1982, hunting for targets at private receptions mutated into a massive state operation. The intelligence apparatus took over. The Mukhabarat operated as the terrifying core of the Iraqi state. It commanded a colossal national budget to hunt foreign spies and eliminate political dissidents. But the regime reduced its elite operatives to personal couriers. They became highly trained delivery men for live human cargo. Agents systematically targeted girls 15 to 19 years old. The extraction process was flawlessly bureaucratic. An official rhythmic knock on the front door. Men in immaculate suits presenting a forged paper summons for mandatory national service. Parents stood paralyzed as operatives escorted the teenager outside and locked her inside a black government vehicle. The cars drove directly to the Mansour district. Baghdad's most exclusive diplomatic enclave provided perfect cover behind its fortified walls. Inside the estate, the isolation was absolute. Why would the president's son need personal dossiers on schoolgirls? It was a bureaucratic catalog for the systematic terror and blackmail of entire families. Uday kept locked safes filled with neatly organized school report cards, home addresses, and phone numbers of every relative. The heavy metal clank of closing filing cabinets sealed their fate. Armed military units parked outside the victims' homes to enforce total silence. The government machinery swallowed the crimes without a single trace. Across the entire country, authorities filed 0 police reports and opened 0 official investigations regarding the missing civilians. This machinery of absolute state complicity cracked into public view only once. 1984. A student vanished from Baghdad University. She studied at the law school. Baghdad University stood as the premier academic fortress of Iraq. Yet, despite its rigid status as the ultimate legal center of the country, that institutional prestige offered 0 armor against government tyranny. The trap started with a simple piece of paper, a forged academic award carrying an official state stamp. A government vehicle waited at the curb. The young woman stepped inside. She never came back. The true nature of the regime surfaced the moment her father demanded answers. The state apparatus did not hunt the kidnappers. It targeted the grieving family. The national legal system paralyzed itself on command. The regime punished any attempt to seek justice with the immediate social and economic destruction of the entire bloodline. The authorities filed exactly 0 police reports. The courts opened 0 criminal cases. Instead, state security officers marched directly into the father's workplace, delivered a quiet threat, and stripped him of his career that same afternoon. The impunity of 1984 unlocked the doors to official state power. In 1985, Uday took command of the Iraqi Olympic Committee. Soon after, he seized the Iraq Football Association. How do you hide an assembly line of violence in plain sight? You call it a private performance review for the national team. The state poured colossal wealth into athletic development. Uday weaponized the funding. He legally used the national budget to construct a private prison right inside a government institution. The headquarters underwent a rapid architectural purge. Contractors installed heavy tinted glass across the executive suites. They carved hidden doors into the concrete walls. Guards escorted female athletes through these secret access points. They bypassed the regular administration completely. The dull hum of 24-hour video surveillance systems echoed through the corridors. National pride became a state-sponsored trap. Individual disciplines suffered first: gymnastics, swimming, tennis. By 1986, panic silently gripped the capital. Families scrambled to save their daughters from the national roster. They forged medical records overnight. Parents suddenly invented severe asthma, chronic joint pain, and acute academic breakdowns just to break official contracts. Coaches stared at the floor. Questioning a summons meant losing a career. The machine operated with cold bureaucratic precision. Official letters directed athletes to private hotel suites for mandatory physical assessments. The age of the youngest gymnasts and swimmers called to these rooms was 15. By 1993, Uday would forge national television into a massive personal recruitment network. But he laid the concrete foundation of this system in 1987. How do you hide dozens of captives right in the center of the capital? You use government bunkers. Uday seized prime real estate across Baghdad. He locked down heavily fortified villas in the Karada, Qadisiyah, and Mansour districts. Armed guards patrolled the perimeters 24 hours a day. The heavy thud of armored gates slamming shut in Mansour instantly severed all street noise. Complete isolation. Insiders called these properties the silent zones, state-funded underground chambers built to swallow people whole. Logistics required targets. The state media provided the supply line. French and Jordanian diplomats noticed the pattern first. Young, prominent female television presenters vanished from the screens. One rising star from Baghdad's Channel 9 walked into the Ministry of Information. She arrived for a scheduled broadcast. She stepped through the doors. She never walked out. State infrastructure absorbed the crime. Panicked families demanded answers. The regime erased the trail. Official government documents listed the missing women as having abruptly resigned and left the country. The concrete walls that concealed those vanished women were no longer necessary. By October 1988, Uday transitioned to public executions. A high-profile reception, foreign diplomats, military top brass. Suddenly, Uday grabbed a weapon. He wielded a walking stick with a solid gold handle. He swung it hard. Wood connected with bone. The victim collapsed. Uday stood over the man. He repeatedly smashed the heavy gold pommel directly into his skull. Dark blood spread rapidly across the brightly polished marble floor. The elite crowd froze. Generals, cabinet ministers, and armed presidential guards simply watched. No one stepped forward. No one stopped the slaughter. The man bleeding out on the marble was Kamel Hanajego. He was not a mere servant. He served as Saddam Hussein's personal food taster, a human shield against poison. Within the rigid architecture of the dictatorship, attacking the president's primary security asset equated to high treason. Such acts demanded a firing squad. But Uday possessed absolute immunity. He slaughtered Kamel for introducing Saddam to a second wife, Samira Shahbandar. Uday perceived this secret marriage as a direct assault on his own political inheritance. The Iraqi state apparatus suffered instant paralysis. A brazen murder occurred in plain sight of the International Diplomatic Corps. Yet the police filed no reports. The judiciary issued no warrants. The entire legal framework of the nation officially evaporated for one individual. There was no tribunal. Saddam Hussein quietly shipped his son off to a comfortable exile in Switzerland. A few months later, Uday boarded a plane and flew straight back to Baghdad. The elite barely wiped the blood off the marble before the state machine pivoted. Uday was back from exile. The national security apparatus immediately became his private syndicate. A 17-year-old girl walked into a local precinct. She filed an assault report against the dictator's son. She expected legal protection. Instead, military intelligence operatives arrested her within hours. Her father was a schoolteacher from Baghdad. He knocked on government doors. He demanded answers. The Iraqi military intelligence, the fearsome Istikbarat, was explicitly built to hunt foreign spies and dismantle enemy networks. Now, the state deployed its elite counter-espionage resources to terrorize a civilian. What happened to those who tried to seek protection from the law? The law came for them. The violence mutated into official policy. When a woman rejected Uday, presidential guards dragged her straight to the Ministry of Interior. Bureaucrats stamped her file. They officially labeled her as uncooperative and disloyal to the regime. Rejecting the prince legally equated to high treason. The entire law enforcement system operated as a personal kidnapping cartel. The whole family simply vanished. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein's armor breached the Kuwaiti border. The geopolitical shockwave ignited the Gulf War. Coalition bombers soon shattered Iraq's infrastructure, dropping over 88,000 tons of explosives on a paralyzed nation. Sanctions strangled the economy. The state fought for basic survival. But while cities burned, Uday used the national collapse as a perfect smokescreen. He transformed his personal kidnapping ring into a systematic, state-sanctioned syndicate. Heavy black-tinted Mercedes sedans began idling outside the iron gates of ordinary high schools. Exhaust fumes mixed with the dry morning dust. Silent operatives watched the crowds. The targets were girls aged 14 to 17. Snatch squads grabbed children still wearing their school uniforms. Drivers forced them into the dark leather interiors of government vehicles. Escorts told the terrified teenagers they were selected for a matter of national honor, a private meeting with a high official. Instead, convoys delivered them directly into Uday's heavily guarded compounds. There was no ceremony. There was no way out. The sheer chaos of wartime Iraq granted the dictator's son absolute, unchecked immunity. To ensure total silence, his recruiters systematically hunted victims from distant provincial hubs like Baquba, Hilla, and Samarra, cities where isolated families held zero political influence. Who erased the evidence left by the dictator's son? Career intelligence officers and state doctors. The chaos of a losing war demanded a systematic approach. By early 1991, a shadow department materialized deep inside the presidential palace. It operated as an institutionalized machine. The hierarchy mirrored a legitimate government agency. Active-duty intelligence officers handled the hunting. Security drivers navigated state-owned fleet vehicles. Government medical staff closed the loop. The geopolitical reality exposed a rotting state. Iraq bled out under strict United Nations sanctions. Citizens starved in the streets. Yet, the national budget and elite military assets flowed directly into a shadow rape syndicate. The abductions ran like a bureaucratic conveyor belt. Agents breached a civilian home. A father stood completely paralyzed. An officer slapped a standard government form onto the dining table. The document legally classified the missing daughter as a runaway. The officer offered a pen. The threat hung in the air. Sign the forgery or lose your state pension and face the secret police. The father took the pen. He signed the paper. Then came the cleanup. A sterile smell of clinical disinfectants flooded the hallways. State doctors unpacked specialized medical kits. They scrubbed the physical trauma and erased the traces of extreme violence with surgical precision. The government shielded the predator. Once the paperwork cleared, the system swallowed the target whole. Victims vanished into the heavily guarded palaces, held captive for either 48 hours or several days. By 1993, snatching targets off the streets was no longer enough. Uday wanted his victims to walk into the trap themselves. He built a hunting ground in plain sight, a media empire. The Babel newspaper and its satellite television network launched that same year. On screen, it was a vibrant youth channel. Pop culture, music, auditions. Under the blinding glare of studio spotlights, young women smiled for the cameras. But beyond those lights lay the pitch-black reality of private summons. It was an industrial-scale recruitment machine. The state subsidized the broadcasts. While transmitters beamed modern entertainment to millions across the nation, Iraqi taxpayers unwittingly funded the dictator's son's personal brothel. The trap worked flawlessly. Producers scoured auditions and promised stardom. In 1994, the system targeted a popular singer from the southern port city of Basra. The bait was official. An invitation to perform at a state-sponsored event. She arrived at the heavily fortified palace alongside her band. Musicians carried their instruments inside. Then, the protocol snapped. Armed guards blocked the corridors. They physically separated the woman from her crew. They escorted her away alone. Behind closed doors, Uday delivered his demands. She refused. The system did not forgive. Weeks later, state media announced her sudden death, a fabricated narrative. Suicide, authorities claimed. No investigations followed. No family members viewed the remains. By direct government order, state security forces secretly buried her body in a closed grave. Television influence unlocked the gates of Al Radwaniyah Palace for exclusive receptions. It built a flawless system of absolute power. But in just a few years, this exact architecture of control would collapse into a barrage of bullets tearing through the dictator's son on the streets of Baghdad. First came the mechanics of isolation. Al Radwaniyah stood right next to Baghdad International Airport, a heavily fortified military facility masquerading as a cultural venue. Access required passing through severe security cordons, checkpoints, body searches. Baskets overflowed with confiscated mobile phones at the entrance to the military compound. Nobody brought the outside world in. Nobody took secrets out. Inside, the trap snapped shut. The clinking of imported crystal drowned out the sharp clicks of heavy doors locking behind the guests. The guest list mapped Iraq's entire power structure. Top military commanders rubbed shoulders with senior Ba'ath Party functionaries. Foreign businessmen hunted for lucrative oil and infrastructure deals. They drank expensive alcohol. They consumed narcotics. Subordinates delivered young girls directly into the halls. When terrified women tried to escape, security physically shoved them back inside. This was not a private vice. It was an institutional snare. By holding a glass of scotch and ignoring the abuse, the elite became active accomplices. Their sheer presence legitimized the violence. They traded human dignity for oil quotas and political survival. The state apparatus operated as a personal bodyguard for a predator. Nobody just walked away. Armed guards stood stationed at every single exit. That illusion of absolute immunity collapsed on December 12, 1996, when the motorcade entered the Mansour district. At least 7 bullets shredded his chest, legs, and lower spine. Guards dragged a blood-soaked body onto the surgical table. Moments earlier, another vehicle had violently blocked his route. Point-blank muzzle flashes lit up the dark. The elite streets choked on the heavy stench of cordite and burnt rubber. How did the regime respond to the assassination attempt? State intelligence launched indiscriminate mass arrests, publicly executing dozens of random citizens in broad daylight. Underground insurgents had actually orchestrated the hit, but ordinary people faced the firing squads. Security forces completely locked down Ibn Sina Hospital. Decades prior, this facility stood as the absolute pride of Iraqi medical science. The regime transformed it into a heavily fortified bunker exclusively for Saddam's inner circle. Surgeons operated relentlessly until dawn. He survived. But the mechanics of Iraqi terror permanently changed. Physical mutilation did not end his cruelty. It industrialized it. This ambush would confine him to a wheelchair forever, forcing him to delegate systematic abductions to state subordinates in the following years. He officially transferred the daily execution of violence to his personal guards, paralyzed, immobilized. But the terror did not stop. It merely put on a suit. Confined to a wheelchair, Uday weaponized the entire Ministry of Education. It started quietly, a single classified directive landing on a local principal's desk. By the late 1990s, public high schools across Baghdad received absolute orders. Principals drafted the lists. They identified top students, but academic grades were secondary. They explicitly needed girls who were presentable and well-mannered. Bureaucratic ink masking pure predation. These were coded terms. A direct selection process for the dictator's son. The state apparatus ground into motion. Prior to the international sanctions, the Iraqi education system was the absolute pride of the Middle East. Now, it served as a state hunting ground. This institutional hijacking forced tens of thousands of ordinary teachers to become complicit suppliers of victims. Speak up, and internal security took you away. Teachers complied under the immediate threat of execution. The state set the trap. Then came the knock on the door. Government officials arrived at family homes. They posed as formal representatives from the presidential office. Heavy government stamps hit forged scholarship documents with a dry thud. Expectation, a prestigious national grant and ultimate family pride. Reality, a one-way trip to Uday's locked private compound. Families were deeply flattered. In a starving nation, state connections meant basic survival. Parents watched proudly. A schoolgirl, dressed in her absolute best, stepped out the front door. She slid into the back seat of a state vehicle. The heavy car door slammed shut. When desperate fathers later called the police, the lines went dead. Brothers who demanded answers ended up in prison cells. No official investigations, no public records. Girls vanished into government cars. By 1998, the state terror machine reached weddings in Karbala and Tikrit. Why would elite troops guard servers? They held a monthly registry of vanished women. The raids targeted public celebrations. Armed convoys surrounded banquet halls. The music stopped. Guests froze. Uday walked in, scanned the crowd, and pointed. Brides. Bridesmaids, ordinary guests. Guards dragged them into luxury vehicles. In late 1998, armed men took a 19-year-old woman from a Karbala wedding. Guests sat in dead silence. Days later, locals found her tortured body on the city outskirts. Her father demanded justice. Security forces arrested him the next morning. Fear paralyzed the society. Families canceled gatherings. People hid. This scale of kidnapping required logistics. Defectors later exposed the system to the United Nations. Uday's personal office managed a dedicated digital database. Clerks logged the data: names, ages, origins, return status. Most files remain permanently open. The state repurposed its military apparatus for one man's hunting logs. The elite Republican Guard, forged to protect the country from foreign invasions, now protected hard drives filled with stolen citizens. The army guarded the backup copies. To bury the surging lists of the vanished, the regime demanded a new architecture of silence. By the turn of the millennium, Uday forged his own shadow penal system, completely severed from Iraqi jurisdiction. He designed the blueprint for permanent isolation. In 2003, American troops breached these secret facilities. Combat boots kicked open heavy steel doors. Soldiers pushed through suffocatingly narrow corridors. They found holding blocks with cells the size of cramped wardrobes. Thick, soundproofed walls swallowed every echo. In the interrogation wing, surgical equipment sat ready on sterile exam tables. The cold metal of heavy chairs remained bolted dead to the concrete floor in a soundproofed room. Total physical control. This infrastructure operated in a parallel reality. The official Ministry of Justice held zero authority over these blocks. Government cartographers omitted the compounds entirely. One black site operated near Baghdad International Airport. Another hid securely on the dusty outskirts of Mosul. Uday's loyal Fedayeen militia secured the perimeters. By constructing this private archipelago, Uday effectively canceled the state's monopoly on justice, creating a sovereign zone of absolute lawlessness a few kilometers from the capital. A shadow empire, built solely to consume his personal targets. Inside the female-only wing, the plaster held the final records. 8 female names, scratched desperately into a single wall panel of one tiny cell. Beside those names, the cracked walls preserved only 2 dates, 2000 and 2001. The state itself surrendered to these black sites. Iraqi medicine became an accomplice by default. One survivor broke the total silence. She fled to Turkey. Her testimony exposed the raw mechanics of the shadow system. Women vanished. Guards held them in absolute isolation. Starved, beaten. When one girl sprinted during transport, guards hunted her down within hours. She never returned. But shattered flesh requires maintenance. Who treated the victims? State surgeons, woken by the military in the middle of the night. Blinding headlights of military SUVs cut through the darkness. Heavily armed patrols backed the vehicles directly to the rear loading docks of government hospitals. Baghdad doctors received the cargo. Broken women, fractured ribs, crushed faces, massive internal bleeding. Even inside the sprawling medical city complex, the absolute center of Iraqi healthcare, fear overrode the Hippocratic Oath. Nurses handed the staff empty medical records. Uday's men strictly forbade documenting the true cause of the fractures. Doctors wrote down phantom car accidents. They invented clumsy falls. A suffocating terror paralyzed the civil institutions. Healing meant covering up torture. The hospital corridors turned into extensions of the prison cells. Doctors washed their hands. They picked up the tools. Surgeons silently sewed up the wounds. They asked no questions.